What's up guys, today we're going to be talking about the top 5 one-card value engines, but first let's talk about what a value engine is. And normally it's going to take more than just one card. A perfect example is something like an Archmage Emeritus and then a Stormkiln Artist. Now whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, not only are we generating mana, we're also getting card draw, and that's exactly what I want my value engines to do. Now let's not confuse this with something like a Corvold, where his whole deck is kind of a card draw engine because you generate treasure tokens and then you're using those treasure tokens to sacrifice and draw cards. Now he's card draw in the command zone, and he's kind of a one card value engine because the entire deck is built around treasure tokens, but he doesn't do that by himself, right? I'm looking at more like Nadu cards, right? Not only does this card put lands into play, but additionally it draws you cards. So that's exactly what we're going to be looking at in this video. So let's shout out those patrons and get into it. Newsome and Irrelevant, you guys rock. The first card I want to showcase here is the Gitrog Ravenous Ride. This guy does exactly what we want to do. He draws cards and he puts additional lands into play. All we have to do is saddle him up with a creature, we sacrifice that creature, and then we draw cards equal to that creature's power and put that many lands into play. This is going to be amazing because notably you don't have to draw the lands that you put into play. So if you have extra lands in your hand, you can just put them right onto the battlefield. In Jund, where you have extra combat steps, this is absolutely insane. And I do want to say people are only putting this in power matter strategies, which I understand, but even in aristocrat strategies where you have very low power creatures, sacrificing a 1/1 to draw a card and put an additional land into play is still pretty good. Before we move on to number 4, I want to talk about another card. I know it's top 5s, but hey, I make the rules here, so let's talk about the Gitrog Monster. I absolutely love this guy in your landfall strategies, and then additionally, there is a plethora of ways to just play lands from your graveyard now, so even if you don't have a ton of colors and you're only in Gilgari, playing lands from the graveyard is super easy, and you could almost jam this guy in any deck at this point. And then he allows you to sacrifice lands, which enables himself, so you're getting the card advantage, and then he allows you to play additional lands. And then once you add fetch lands to the scenario, it gets insane because this guy allows you to draw a card whenever a land hits the graveyard. Whether you're milling, whether you're sacrificing lands from the battlefield, the card advantage he provides is pretty insane. But again, I do love playing him in decks that already want to focus on playing lands from the graveyard. Now moving on to nope, just kidding, we're talking about Thalia and the Gitrog Monster. One more bonus card because turns out every card with Gitrog printed on it does exactly what I'm talking about in this video. It draws you cards and allows you to play additional lands or put more lands into play, which is ramp. I know these are slower than something like an Archmage Emeritus and a Stormkiln Artist, but you can kind of see where I'm going with this category. I want cards that generate mana and draw me cards, and that's just going to make your deck more efficient, and it's going to put you ahead of your opponents. Quick little side tangent, the Command Zone actually did a study a couple years ago where they looked at every single game they had played on the channel, and then they were looking for similarities between the winners of those games, and one of the ones that came out was the person that had more lands in play had a higher chance of winning, which makes sense, right? The more lands in play, the more mana you have, the more mana you have, the more spells you can cast, the more spells you cast, the more impactful you are for the game. So that's kind of the thought process in including some of these in your deck, right? You want cards that not only draw you cards, that way you're able to draw into more lands to play, and you want those cards that also allow you to put additional lands into play. That way we slowly catapult ourselves ahead of our opponents, and it happens slowly, like by a turn-by-turn basis. It doesn't happen all at once, so you don't become the threat out of nowhere. Now moving on, I wanted to talk about the Thalia and the Gitrog because again, all 3 of the printings of the Gitrog fit this theme perfectly. Now whenever this one attacks, you can sacrifice a creature, draw a card. It's a little bit of a stacks piece, so it's also going to slow down our opponents, and then additionally it allows you to play additional lands. Now let's move on to number 4. Number 4 is not going to surprise any of you guys, and I won't spend a bunch of time on it, but we're talking about Shigeki Jukai Visionary. Now I know this isn't card draw, and that's exactly what you guys are saying, right? This doesn't draw you any cards, but essentially what it does is it allows you to mill cards, and then mill in the right deck can just draw cards, right? If we have 6 on the battlefield, it essentially turns our entire graveyard into our hand as long as we have lands in our hand. So not only are we able to turn those 4 cards into card advantage in the right deck, but additionally he puts lands into play. Not to mention, in Enchantress strategies, I've also started running him because he's an enchantment that you can consistently play every single turn. So it sets all of your Enchantress effects off, and then additionally, he has that channel ability. So if you accidentally mill a key piece, you can easily get it back. Moving on, let's talk about our Elven Chorus effects. Now this is going to be true for anything like Oracle of Moldiah or your Elven Chorus. What this allows us to do is it allows us to tap our creatures for mana, so we're getting ramp, and then it allows you to cast your creatures from the top of your library. Something to note here, whenever you're casting something from the top of your library, you need to think about it like you drew the card and then cast it. So that's actually card advantage because it's getting cards out of your library onto the battlefield and generating you value. So anything that's allowing you to cast something from the top of your library is card advantage in my opinion. So Oracle of Moldiah, kind of the same thing. You're playing lands from the top of your library. Not only are you drawing those land cards, you're additionally putting them into play. So that's something to think about whenever you're looking at these cards. And I always like to shove a couple of these in my deck, again, to just keep the ramp coming, and it also keeps the top of your library live. You know you're not going to be drawing lands because you've kept all of the lands off the top of your library. Moving on to number 2, we're going to get super simple with it. It's Chulane, Teller of Tales. This guy does exactly what we're talking about in this video. You play a creature spell, not only do you draw a card, but additionally you get to put a land into play. We're ramping a ton and we're drawing a ton of cards. Notably, don't skimp on this guy in the 99. He is incredibly powerful. We all know that because him in the command zone is not okay, but if you guys put him in the 99, he's going to put in work as well, especially in those blink or ETB strategies. These colors are full of amazing ETB creatures, so being able to return them back to your hand and cast them again for value is going to be insane, especially when you're putting additional lands and drawing cards while doing that. Moving on to number 1, it's Dahada. I love Dahada in these strategies that just want to mill a ton of cards because you really don't care if you're milling legendaries or not. I want you guys to just play this card, don't care about the legendaries, mill a ton, generate some treasure tokens, and if you put this in a blink strategy, it's insane. Blinking a commander is not only going to reset her ability, but it also resets her loyalty. So if you're blinking her a ton, you're able to mill a ton of cards and generate a ton of treasure tokens. Just something to think about when you're building those Mardu decks, because that's absolutely insane, generates a ton of value. Not to mention, while we're in the color Mardu, it's very easy to get access to our graveyard. So any of those key pieces that we milled while generating a ton of treasure tokens, you guessed it, we can easily get them back from the graveyard. If there's one thing this video has taught me, graveyard decks are really freaking good right now, especially in casual. We've got 6, Mardu's got access to the graveyard, there's a ton of ways to get access to your graveyard, and a lot of cards that interact with the graveyard right now that just give you a ton of value. So again, go build those graveyard decks. Another thing I want you guys to do is go ahead and leave in the comments down below your 1 card value engines that you use in your decks. Maybe I missed a few. I'm always looking for more, so I'm really happy to see what you guys come up with in the comments down below. With that being said, I would like to shout out the patrons, Newsome, Excessum, Irrelevant. You guys rock. Chicken Salad, you as well. I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you guys in the next one.